Welcome to this explainer. I'm genuinely thrilled we're doing this today because we're about to step into the absolute, ultimate, most expansive creative workspace in existence, the human mind. I really want you to stop thinking of your brain as like a hard drive or a calculator. Instead, picture an artist's studio. It's vast, it's a little messy, and it's just filled with canvases, weird colors, and raw materials waiting to be transformed. Today, we're putting on the smock of an unconventional artist. We're going to explore a totally different way of looking at how we think, how we create, and how we actually solve the most complex puzzles in our lives. We're diving into the power of the neglected thought.
So, start by visualizing that mental studio space. Really look around. Now, look down at the floor. You see those crumpled up pieces of paper? Those discarded scraps of ideas you tossed out just because they didn't quite fit the picture you were currently painting? Well, what if your greatest masterpiece is literally sitting in that trash right now? We spend so much time obsessing over the ideas neatly displayed on the easel, the ones that make sense to everyone else, right? But as the artist of your own reality, your true breakthroughs, they're not going to come from the obvious choices. No way. They are hiding in the very thoughts you've already thrown away.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the mental art studio. Let's actually define what our raw materials are here.
Before we can even think about creating a masterpiece, we have to understand what it is we're so casually sweeping into the dustbin every single day. We call these discarded materials neglected thoughts. Basically, these are the ideas, the random data points, or those strange little connections that our conventional, highly efficient minds just automatically toss out. And why? Well, mostly because our brains label them as irrelevant, completely irrational, or frankly, just way too inconvenient to deal with at the time. But here is the absolute secret of the unconventional artist. These neglected thoughts, they are not garbage. They're the unrefined, highly potent raw materials that are absolutely crucial to create something entirely new. They're the bizarre pigments and odd textures that mainstream painters wouldn't even dare to touch. Which brings us to part 2, the non-genius trash can, or how the filtering mechanism of the mind actually works.
To figure out how to stop throwing away pure gold, I want you to imagine a ruthless, highly strong corporate manager who's suddenly overseeing your messy mental studio. This manager couldn't care less about art. They only care about cognitive efficiency. They just want the mental factory floor running smoothly and predictably, with zero weird interruptions. And to do this, the manager uses 3 distinct filters. First up, the relevance filter. If a piece of data doesn't fit the immediate goal, like, say, an anecdotal report that doesn't perfectly match your current hypothesis, boom, straight into the trash. Second is the plausibility filter. This one violently rejects any idea that contradicts the dominant paradigm. If established authority says the sky is blue, any thought suggesting a tinge of green is instantly shredded. And finally, my absolute personal favorite, the convenience filter. This one acts like a terribly lazy roommate who absolutely refuses to do the hard work. It aggressively avoids complex ideas or multivariable experiments that require any sort of mental sweat. If it takes too much energy to process, your brain just goes, nope, and tosses it right out.
So the crucial point here is this massive trade-off: cognitive efficiency versus cognitive blindness. Having those 3 active filters actually makes most people highly, highly efficient. You can get through your day, do your job, and survive without being paralyzed by a mountain of raw data. But, and this is a really big but, it simultaneously makes you entirely predictable. You become completely bound by convention and totally blind to new solutions. The conventional mind is basically painting by numbers, but the unconventional artist, they need to tear up that number sheet completely. Moving on to part 3, gathering discarded materials, which is really the strategy of genius.
So if the typical brain acts like a ruthless corporate manager, how does a true visionary operate? Well, they cultivate a superpower. Becoming this kind of high-level critical thinker requires a very specific, almost counterintuitive process. Step 1, you have to deliberately loosen those automatic filters. You literally have to tell that corporate manager in your mind to take a vacation. Step 2, build a temporary holding area for that rejected data. Instead of chucking the weird, irrelevant, or inconvenient thoughts straight in the trash, put it on a shelf. Give it some actual real estate in your mind. And step 3, observe these materials completely without judgment. Seriously, don't try to force them into a painting right away. Just look at them. A true genius deliberately suspends their filters so they can gather the exact same data that everybody else is so eager to throw away.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that holding area is just so vital. The saying goes, truth often hides in the gap. Think about the negative space in a painting, the empty areas around the main subject. Neglected thoughts almost always emerge from contradictions. They're the outlier data point, the pattern that somehow defies the known rule, that one thing that shouldn't exist but somehow does. A genius doesn't discard that contradiction. They revere it. They recognize that the gap where two ideas clash is exactly where reality is hiding, just waiting to be uncovered. Which takes us to part 4, the masterpiece of the synthesis, where we start connecting the unalike. This is the absolute climax of the artist's process. Now we finally start combining these totally disparate materials, and you can see the exact alchemy of genius right here. You take a neglected thought from domain A, say an outlier data point in quantum physics, normally thrown out, but you've saved it. Then you look at your holding area and pull a neglected thought from a totally unrelated domain B, like some unconventional idea about human consciousness. When you give space to these two completely separate neglected thoughts side by side, they interact, they synthesize, and suddenly, boom, you create a masterpiece, an unconventional paradigm shift. You basically find a shockingly simple solution to a complex problem, all because you were willing to smash two rejected ideas together. But let's be honest, to do this, you have to cultivate an unwavering openness to the absurd. Giving space to neglected thoughts means you've got to entertain the fringe, the oddities, the massive what-if scenarios. You have to treat the established mainstream consensus, no matter how loud or authoritative it claims to be, as just one single data point. It's just one tiny brushstroke on a massive canvas. You really have to be willing to look a little bit crazy to everyone else who's still out there desperately guarding their trash cans. Ultimately, the difference comes down to operating within the known framework versus shifting the framework entirely. True genius isn't about finding slightly better answers within the same old boundaries. It's not about painting a slightly better landscape using the exact same technique as everyone else. No, true genius is about shifting the framework itself. And you do that by bravely retrieving and honoring the very ideas that society prematurely discarded. So I want to leave you with this final, truly vital question for your mental studio. What absurd idea will you refuse to discard today? Next time your brain tries to auto-delete a strange thought just because it's inconvenient or irrelevant, I challenge you to catch it. Put it on the shelf. Just let it sit there. Become the unconventional artist of your own reality and watch as your discarded scraps become your greatest masterpiece. Keep questioning, keep giving space, and hey, thank you so much for exploring with me today.